Today, we are talking about the number one myth that is keeping lawyers behind, and that is the myth of more. So stay tuned. What is this myth of more? Well, it permeates the legal culture. It permeates high achievers and high achieving culture. It is something that we put so much stock in that we think it must be the answer. It must be the thing that's going to make us feel better. It must be the thing that's going to stop us from feeling anxiety or overwhelm. But the myth of more is simply a myth that lawyers have bought into because they were hoping, praying for a solution to the discomfort that they felt or the dread or the overwhelm that you feel. I know this because I experienced all of the dread, all of the overwhelm when I was a prosecutor. And I didn't know what to do with it except to do more, to be more disciplined, to give myself more self-care, to do more work and to do it faster. That's another version of more, doing things faster. And this myth of more is what prevents lawyers from ever feeling in control of their practice, ever feeling in control of their time. It is something that blocks us from creating a life where we feel fulfilled, where we feel like we are creating something that's sustainable, that allows us to have a life where we are connected to people we love and not just connected to our laptops. So I want you to really take this to heart. This myth of more is something I saw so much as a lawyer. I still see it when I talk to lawyers every single day. It's this myth of if I do more, then I'm going to be more successful. I'm going to have more status. I'm going to have more happiness, more fulfillment. And it is the exact opposite. So let's just look at these, because if you are thinking this way, you're not going to be able to solve for any of the problems I just mentioned: overwhelm, creating more time for yourself and loved ones. You cannot solve a problem from the level from which it was created. You can't. You have to begin thinking completely differently. And if you've been buying in, like so many lawyers do, like I did for so long, in this myth of more, that's going to make everything better, then that has to go in order for you to progress. You will stay stuck where you are unless you give up this myth that being more disciplined, that having more time to give myself self-care, more things, more vacation, that any of that is going to solve the long-term problem. Will they make you feel better in the short term? Going on vacation always does, right? You're like, wow, I'm no longer in the same environment I was. I feel so good. Maybe what I need are more vacations. But that is just a myth of more, as if doing more things is going to help you solve for the problem of overwhelm, stress, anxiety, and more. Like, pun intended there, right? It's not, because you are the same person. When you go on vacation and you come back, you're the same person. So you hear all these people complaining that, wow, I needed more time on vacation. I needed a vacation from my vacation. I needed more days on the other end to feel better after my vacation. That's because you're the same person. You are the same person before you go on vacation, and you're the same person when you come back from vacation. It's not until you give up the myths of who you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do that you will actually progress. And that's why this episode is so important. Because as long as you think that doing more yoga, going on more vacations, having more projects around the house so that your house is updated, having more things, having more calendars, having more planners, as long as you think more is the answer, you're not going to focus on what is really going to be the solution, which is changing who you are from the inside. Because you cannot solve problems from the same level from which they were created, the same mindset, the same way of thinking. That is not going to cut it. What needs to happen is a brand new view of what is possible for you, a brand new view of the situation that you are in. You need a 10,000-foot view and not looking at things so myopically and believing that if I do more, if I stay later at the office, if I just do more things and say yes more often, then I am going to achieve the promotion. I am going to make more money, all of these things. As long as you're thinking in those terms, yeah, maybe you'll have some more money, but you are going to have more unhappiness because you are not creating the well-being that's required to take control of your practice, to take control of your finances, and coming from a place of centeredness, a place from knowing. You can't do that as long as you're tapped into this myth of more that the legal profession really sells. I saw it so often in my office. You got to stay later. You've got to say yes more. You've got to do more. You've got to go above and beyond. And it's not to say you're not a person of integrity who is going to do the work and you're going to show up in a professional manner. All this means is that you are giving up the idea that you need to do more to create the success that you want to create. And turn into a mindset that focuses more on your well-being to create that harmony between you showing up in integrity with the work that you are doing as a lawyer and you creating a life that you absolutely love, not one that you tolerate, not one that you are, it'll get better, hoping that it'll get better with time. It's one that you are intentional with. It is one in which you are actively involved in taking authority over every inch of your life. And that takes a complete mindset shift away from this myth of more and becoming the person who is more open to new things, a person who is more compassionate, both to yourself and other people, and is somebody who is really focused on problem solving from this overarching core of wellness within yourself, well-being within yourself. Because when you start solving problems from that place where you're solving for how do I create well-being in myself, all of the solutions start changing. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a client about this just today. She was noticing how frustrated she was because she would see that red blinking light on her voicemail on her phone, and she would get so irritated because she was thinking to herself, oh my gosh, I've got one more thing to do. I better answer that. I got to do this. I got to do. And I just said, hey, let's pause for a moment. Let's just take a moment here. What's an easy solution to this? Can you give access to your voicemail to your assistant? And she said, oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't even think of that. And this woman is incredibly bright. She is so brilliant. But we cannot solve problems from the place where we were when we created them. We need to be able to take a step back. And that step back is, let me come from a place of making this easier for myself. How can I make this easy for myself? How can I create the easiest solution to this problem? But when we're coming into this myth of more, we're probably doing it. I'm going to just offer this to you. Take a look around your life. Where are you creating more work for yourself? Well, I need to answer more phone calls faster. I need to be able to pick up the phone on one ring. Like, where are you creating lots of work for yourself? Where can you make your life easier? And that can look like a lot of different things. It can look like creating a system. It can look like delegating. It can look like a lot of different things. It can look like coming up with the easiest solutions, like what I just explained. But where a lot of people who are stuck in this myth of more come from is this idea of I need more discipline. And I'm a fan of discipline when you're coming to it from the perspective of I do what I say I'm going to do. I live impeccably. I make a plan and I follow my plan. Okay, I like that. I think that's necessary. If you want to gain muscle, you got to get up and you got to go to the gym. You can't just wish it into being. And that requires you to be consistent, to say, yes, I am going to go to the gym, even if I don't feel like it. But where most lawyers come to discipline from is a place of not enoughness. Not enough. And guess what fills the hole of not enoughness? More. And that's why I think so many lawyers fall into this trap of doing more, is because it fills a hole. They feel not enough. They're not doing enough. And so if they do more, it fills this hole where they have this not enoughness hole. I'm not working hard enough. I'm not making enough money. I'm not a good enough husband, wife, mom. I'm not a good enough lawyer. I'm not a smart enough lawyer. I'm not a fast enough lawyer. I am not a sought out enough lawyer. And so this myth of more comes in, and it sounds really promising. If I do more, then I'm going to get enough. I'm going to have enough. I'm going to be enough. So this myth of more proliferates. And because you see little bits of, hey, when I do work harder, I do get better results. Wow, that's amazing. Oh my gosh, like if I just spend an extra hour every single day doing this task, I will have it done faster. And then you get that dopamine hit when it's done. And your brain interprets that as, yes, this more thing that we're doing, this more thing works. But guess what's on the other side of continuing to follow that path? More overwhelm, more frustration, more anxiety, trying to keep up with everything versus you being in control, you having authority over your time. And that's what, for one example, I see very often lawyers saying yes to every project that walks through the door, yes to everybody who wants a bit of their time, yes, because they think they need to do more, say yes more in order to prove themselves. That's going to fill up that enoughness. They like me enough. My clients like me enough. My boss respects me enough. And we start looking at, well, anytime anybody gives me something to like more work, that's a good thing, right? Because then that means they believe in me. And so that means I need to say yes so I can keep that feeling, that dopamine hit. And so more is good, more is good, more is good. But then what happens is that you end up burning yourself out. In theory, it sounds really great. We're constantly coming in the door, that if you don't have processes, if you don't have systems, if you don't have foundations for these things, you cannot continue to take it on. It's very short-lived. So I want to bring your attention to something that's a long-term fix, because more discipline, more self-care, more vacations, doing more things, saying yes more, these are all focusing on things that in the moment, they feel good. But these are temporary fixes. And the work I do with lawyers, it's long-term fixes. We're not just looking for a quick dopamine hit. We're not just looking for a temporary band-aid on a situation. We want long-term fixes. That's why I work so much with mindset with lawyers, because the mindset is where it's out. It's the base. And if your base is, I need to do more, then you are going to perpetuate the overwhelm that you're feeling. You're going to perpetuate the anxiety and feeling behind. Like that is going to be perpetuated. So you've got to actually clean up the foundation before you can move forward, before you can have the peace you want, the authority over your life that you want. You've got to clean some stuff up. So I want to talk to you today around really reestablishing a well-being mindset where you are the focus of the well-being. And for moms and women out there, pay special attention to this, because you're going to feel guilty. You're going to feel like this is impossible, because our society has trained women to believe that they come last, that everybody else comes first, and that your well-being doesn't matter. Everybody else's well-being matters. So I want you to pay particular attention to this, because you are going to feel more uncomfortable than other people. When you are focused on your well-being, it is not selfish. It is not self-centered. It is a requirement for your success and for you to love and give and be the person you want to be for your family. Because unless you have your well-being at heart, nothing else works. Examples. When lawyers tell me that they are overwhelmed and they're having fights with their husband or they're having arguments with their spouse, it always comes down to them not paying attention to their well-being. And this resentment starts to build because you are not taking care of yourself. Nobody else is going to do it, my friend. It is up to you to ask for what you want and for you to communicate in a loving way what you want. So when I see lawyers frustrated, overwhelmed, there's inevitably a home component to this where they are not communicating what they need to their spouse and they keep taking on more, where they're saying, okay, I'm going to take over the calendar since, clearly my spouse isn't doing it. I'm going to take over this because this isn't getting done the way I wanted it done. I'm going to take this over. I'm going to take that over. And then they end up taking on this weight and they don't release the weight and they don't communicate that they're even feeling a weight. And so then, of course, if you don't communicate it, you can't problem solve for it. So one of the things that needs to happen instead of reaching for more and saying, yes, I'm going to do more is, okay, how can I make this easier? And the only way you can ask that question is if you're coming from a place of well-being, like my well-being matters. How I feel matters. I feel anxious and overwhelmed. I want to feel well rested. I want to feel more loved. I want to feel more calm. I want to feel more peace. And to recognize that what you want matters. And when you recognize that what you want matters, then it creates this foundation where you start asking for what you want. And guess what happens when you start asking for what you want? You start getting it. So when you start asking for things, just know you're going to get it. But you do have to have this foundation of what I want matters. My well-being matters. The fact that I'm feeling annoyed every time my assistant knocks on my door, that matters. That feeling matters. And I want to pay attention to that because that is not well-being in that moment. So in that moment, I know I want something else. I know that I don't want my assistant knocking on my door and interrupting my work. But then what? That's where the problem solving comes in. And if you're trying to solve a problem from a place of frustration and annoyance, you are not going to be able to communicate very well what you want. You are going to be short with your staff. You are going to not have a clear game plan to allow them to follow exactly what you want them to do. When you communicate what you want, you're going to maybe roll your eyes, or maybe you're going to be a little impatient versus being curious and kind and interested in what their feedback is. You're going to feel closed off and disconnected versus connected. And communication requires feeling connected. And feeling connected starts with you being in a place of well-being. So all the decisions that you make need to come from this place of well-being. What do I need in order to feel this well-being? It's not more vacations. You might feel good on vacation, but guess what? You're the same person. You're going to come back. You're going to have the same work on your desk. You are the one who has the authority to take charge of your life and your well-being. And it requires you coming to solutions in a different way. So when I'm working with a client, we start by cleaning up the foundation, right? Because if you build on what you already have, you're just going to build this hodgepodge jumble of like, remember those Lincoln logs? They're not going to be nicely spaced and work well. They're going to be a big jumble of these logs. They're not going to have any shape. And it's going to be incredibly frustrating to go in and try to fix anything because it's all over the place. So we go in, we start just, let's get to a foundation of let's create some well-being for you. And that has me asking them questions. What's going on in this part of your business? What's going on in that part of your business? And you can do this for yourself too. Pick one area of your practice that feels the most frustrating. Just one. And pick one problem that you see in that particular area of your business or practice that is the most frustrating. And just say, okay, look, I know it's frustrating, but I can solve this. How do I make it easier for myself? Just pick one and ask yourself that question. Not from a place of, I need to do more in order to get more work done, more turnover, more clients, whatever it is. If your brain is defaulting to more, we got to clean that up. You actually have to come at this from a place of less. How do I do less? How do I take myself out of this part of my practice? How do I remove myself as a roadblock to a smooth process? Because if you own a business, if you own your own law practice, you are the biggest block to anything getting done. You are. You can't even help it. So how do you take yourself out of it? And that's what I'm working with lawyers on, is how do I take myself out of this link of my assistant constantly needing to ask me questions? How do I take myself out of this particular practice area, me doing all of the work? How can I get myself out of it? So we're coming from a do less mindset, which is going to feel pretty uncomfortable if you are stuck in a do more mindset. Got it. How do you do less? And when you start removing yourself from these different areas, you're going to feel less overwhelmed. At first, you're going to feel uncomfortable though, because you're going to be letting things go. You are going to be creating processes. You're going to become a leader in your practice who's more focused on oversight versus doing the work. Because a more mindset is very focused on doing more, doing everything, having control, versus think about it in terms of quality control. So if you're working, I'm coming up with this chocolate because I'm thinking of the I Love Lucy episode where you've got all the chocolates coming down the line, right? And so you see Lucy trying to keep up with everything. And she's like thinking in this do more mindset. Well, if I just pick up more, I can just throw them down my shirt more. If I stuff them in my mouth, I can get more done. We can keep up with this hamster wheel of chocolate coming down. I can do this. I can do this. I could do this. And it's just more and more and more. How do I stuff more into my shirt? Versus becoming that version of you who isn't doing as much as becoming the leader. Because if you step back from a problem like that, you can start seeing, look, there's some issues we have. We need to communicate with the people down the line, because I need to communicate with my assistant who just constantly books all of these consults back to back to back because she thinks this is helpful to me. But I need to slow the chocolate factory down, and I need to say, look, we need to have some parameters around when you set consults, how many consults you set. We need to talk about how this is going to work for me, because I need to focus on my well-being. You don't have to tell her that. You can say it to yourself, because this is coming from a well-being mindset. You start to create parameters, you start to create processes, you start to have these maybe difficult conversations in which you are communicating what you need and how you want things done. You are asking questions and asking those around you where they might see that they have the ability to step in, but they haven't said anything to you because you haven't opened yourself up to that feedback. That requires that communication. And that comes from a well-being mindset. It doesn't come from a do more mindset. If you're coming from a do more mindset, you are constantly going to be the person doing all of the work. You are not going to be asking your assistant or employees for ideas. because you're going to be taking it all upon yourself. You are not going to be asking for help because you believe you should have all the answers because you're the do more king or queen. That is something that is such a myth in the legal profession, that doing more somehow makes us better, somehow makes us more successful, somehow rises our status. And it's simply not true. Heck, even if it is true, who cares? You know, I spent so many years in an office where all anybody ever cared about was status. What trial did you get? What position are you in the office? And true freedom comes from releasing all of that. True freedom comes when you're no longer concerned about what other people think. And it's scary when you're not used to it. You're used to this structure in which you do more and you're rewarded. You take on more cases and you're rewarded. You work faster and people give you praise. And when you get those short-term dopamine hits, yeah, you get those dopamine hits, but are you truly creating peace? Are you truly creating well-being? And what's the point of living this life if we're not focused on our well-being and peace? Because we didn't come into this world being a lawyer. We came into this world, this bright, amazing, beautiful being that had all of this possibility out in front of us. And as we became structured into this world, as we started hearing from our parents how we should behave, we started trying to fit ourselves into their mold. And as lawyers, we do that in the legal profession. We go into an office and we try to fit ourselves into a mold. And we take that mold, if you own your own practice, you take that into your own business. And that mold that was from an old law firm, an old lawyer who taught you this is the way you're supposed to practice law. You're supposed to do more. You're supposed to say yes more. You're supposed to take on all of these things so that you can prove that you're a good lawyer. That mold becomes who you are in your own business. And the whole reason you started your own business is so you could have more freedom. So how do you want to define yourself? How do you want to come into this place of well-being? And that's going to look different for every single person who's watching or listening to this right now. For some lawyers, it's going to look like, I want to grow my practice and I need to create a sustainable way to do that. So I need to create processes that I have an intimate understanding of and can communicate clearly with my staff. For some lawyers who have larger staff, it's going to be not only creating those systems, but maybe bringing in or having that person who's the overseer, like an office manager. It might be having conversations with that office manager about how they can begin creating processes that are going to streamline things in the office, that are going to take you out of the process, and asking them for ideas. Not giving it over altogether, but really knowing, hey, I have authority here and I need to be intimately involved until this is running like a smooth oiled machine. So I want to take you back to that chocolate episode. So there was no oversight. If there were oversight, somebody would have said, oh, wait a minute, this is moving too quickly for people here. We need to take a pause. We need to figure out what's going on here. We need to understand, why is this moving so quickly? We need to understand why this person thinks things should be going faster when our employees are not able to keep up. We need to check in with our employees. We need to do some experiments. We need to see if slowing things down is going to be helpful, or maybe we come up with a new system. Is that going to be helpful? We need to do some tweaks, some experiments here, because we have metrics we want to hit, but we don't want to do that in a way that's messy, right? I keep coming back to this episode, but think about all the chocolate that was lost, so much chocolate that was lost in that episode. And in your practice area, you could be losing a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of goodwill, because you're not addressing things from this perspective of, How do I solve a problem, but not from the place I have been in the problem? How do I begin to solve a problem without doing more, pushing more, being more disciplined, do more, do more, do more, and instead start to focus more on well-being of myself and of my employees? If I come from that place of well-being, I'm asking questions. I'm trying to solve problems. I'm asking them to help me solve problems. It's a completely different mindset. And that's just talking about employees. We're not even talking about all of the systems happening in your practice right now. We're not even talking about how you're managing your time, what practice areas you're focusing on. Are they even worthwhile? And this is the work I do with my clients as we really take a deep dive into your practice and we start cleaning things up. Because when you start cleaning one area up, these other areas start to become so much easier to clean up. It's a domino effect because you stop thinking from this more mindset and you start thinking from a well-being mindset. You start coming from a place of, wait a minute, this doesn't feel good. Why doesn't this feel good? Let's take a look at this. And when you start taking a closer look, you start to solve for the problems that matter. Long as you're focused on doing more, being more disciplined, all of those things, you're going to be taking reactive steps that aren't going to help you focus on what really matters, to help you focus on what could be solved in your practice that can make your life so much easier. Because if you're stuck in this more mindset, you're reactive. You're thinking that the answer is outside of you. Well, if I get a new planner, that's going to help everything. If I just go on a longer vacation this time, I'm going to have a better reset. It's going to last longer. I'm going to feel better longer when I'm at the office. If I am doing more in the office, then I'm going to have less work at the end of the week. But this is such an interesting myth, right? Because if you feel behind, if you believe you're behind, you're like, wow, I've just got stacks and stacks and stacks of files I've got to work on. And I've been there. I'm never going to get ahead. I'm never going to stop being behind. I feel like I'm drowning. And it seems like the answer is to do more. Well, if I just stay an hour later every single day this week, I can get more of that work done. And logically, that makes sense. Right? Logically, doesn't it seem like you should be able to just say, well, I can knock one more file off every single day, but I've been there before, my friend. This is not how it works. And the reason that it doesn't is because you are not paying attention to your well-being, and your well-being is your battery. Your well-being determines your ability to focus, to organize, to prioritize, to problem solve. And if you do not have your well-being, you cannot stop feeling behind. That was the biggest problem. And I didn't realize this when I was in it. I thought the answer was to do more. I need to do more work. I need to be more disciplined. You're bad. You're lazy. You should be working harder. Those were all the things I was telling myself. And as I look back on it, I was not respectful of my battery. I was not respectful of my well-being. I was disconnected from myself and my well-being. I put all of myself into my work. And because of that, my battery was low and I couldn't focus. And I couldn't wrap my head around anything that was going on to get it organized. And I thought that this was a defect within myself. It was not a defect. It's just that the legal profession doesn't promote well-being. It promotes this do more mentality. And if you are stuck in that do more mentality, you will not be able to achieve well-being. And to me now, that is the ultimate feeling of success. When I have my well-being, I have everything. And it is not an easy task when you've been steeped in the legal culture. It is something that goes counter to that culture. People don't understand it unless they understand well-being and peace and desiring that. They don't understand it because they're so stuck in the structure of, I need to do more to prove myself, to fill that hole of not enoughness. And if that's where you are right now, my friend, I want to let you know that there is hope. You can get to the other side of it. I have, my clients do. You can get to the other side and have that well-being and focus more on creating that for yourself, to create that connection with your family, to enjoy your life more. And that doesn't mean you have to stop being a lawyer. It doesn't mean you have to change your job. It doesn't mean you have to do everything differently. You got to start somewhere, though. So I want to offer to you, if this episode is resonating with you, to book a strategy session with me. You can go to dinacataldo.com/strategy session. Book it. It's complimentary. What have you got to lose? Because if you don't have your well-being, you will lose everything. You will lose your health. You will lose the financial abundance that you are wanting or have, because there's no point in having anything that you have in your life without well-being. And that requires you to get out of this myth of the more being better. Because you can have the abundance, you can have the connection, you can have all the love, you can have everything. But it all starts with how you come to that problem of not having. Are you coming to it from a place of solid, grounded well-being and knowing what you want and then asking for it? Or is it coming from this place of, I need to be doing more work? Because if I work more, I'm going to make more money. And if I make more money, then my family's going to be happier. And if I make more money, then eventually I'm going to be able to spend more time with my family. And if I make more money, then eventually I'm going to be able to have the life that I want. Versus have the life that you want now and have the money. Why wait? That's something that I hear so often from lawyers is, I wish I hadn't waited. I wish I had just gone in and worked with you from the start, because I see how my life is now and I have everything I want here now. There's no waiting. I was thinking about this with myself the other day because I stepped on the scale the other day and I weigh much less than I used to. And for those of you who've been, listening for a long time, you know that I had a breast cancer diagnosis last year and I had a water fast to cure it holistically. Because yes, you can cure cancer holistically. Water fasting is amazing. I did a whole episode on it. I'll link to those in the show notes. But one of the things that happens when you do a water fast is you lose muscle mass. And I said to myself, I want to gain my muscle back. Do it on my own. I could totally set the schedule. I have the discipline. I could set a schedule. I could, go into my home gym. I could do the workouts. I could do that. But I knew that if I hired a trainer, I was going to get so much bang for my buck. I was going to have somebody who was on my side, who knew exactly what I wanted, knew the shortcuts to help me get there. I would have the accountability for myself so I could go in, and I knew there was going to be somebody there who had an appointment with, and then she would show me exactly the workouts to do. And she would push me a little bit. She wouldn't just let me do the bare minimum, which is what I would do if I was on my own, right? But if I have somebody there who could just push me a little bit, just be like, hey, I just need a little bit of a push. I'm going to be able to lift more weight. I'm going to be able to do it faster. I'm going to be able to gain that weight faster. And this is something that I encourage you to do too. If you know you want a life that you love, don't just wait for it. Don't just do the bare minimum. Know that going out and getting the help that you need is what will get you there faster. Because that person that I'm going to, my personal trainer, she knows the shortcuts. She knows the mistakes. She can help me with my form. She can help push me just the amount that I want without being mean to me. Because you can push me just the right amount to help me gain muscle faster. She and I can have conversations about my health and protein and all of those things that nobody else cares about. And that is the person I want on my side. So if you want someone who's on your side, who's going to help you get to where you want to go faster, book a strategy session with me and let's get started. All right, my friend, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.